Criminal Justice Commission, working on both impacts and behavioral health deflection. I'm so pleased that you could join us this morning for this meeting. As a reminder, this is a public meeting, so it is being recorded and the chat feature is turned off. Please direct all questions either to grant staff or to the co-chairs. Today's anticipated meeting schedule is shown here. Please note that all times are estimates and we will be squeezing in at least one break. So Avery, could you take the roll for us, please?
Yes, happy to. And I see some folks are still joining. Okay, Sam Byers.
Present. Good morning.
Good morning.
Wait, I have to
Ken
say something
Sanchagrin?
just a minute.
Present. Good morning.
Judge Shanti.
Present. Good morning.
Morning. Jeremiah Stromberg.
Good morning. I'm here.
Wonderful. Liz Weber.
Present.
Steve Gunnels.
Good morning. I'm here.
Good morning. Eric Swallow. Chief Harnden. I see her on the call. Chief Harnden. Maybe we'll come back. Commissioner Hall. Alicia Beamer. Stacy Brubaker.
Good morning. Present.
Dr. Brigham.
Present.
Sheriff Landers.
Good morning, I'm here.
Wonderful. Dr. Stanfill. Senator Gelser Bluen. Janie Gullickson. RJ Navarro.
Present. Good morning.
Good morning. Michelle Mason. Representative Conrad.
Good morning. I'm here.
Thank you. Paul Solomon. And Carl McPherson. And then let's go back to Chief Harnden.
Sorry, I was trying to get my computer work. I am here.
Wonderful. Okay, and it looks like we have 11, so we have quorum.
Great. Thank you so much, Avery. So we will now pause for public comment. Any members of the public who wish to provide a comment on any item on today's agenda, please do so now. You can feel free to use the raise hand feature on Teams, or alternatively, if you are joining us via teleconference, you may unmute. I do see one. I see Grant Hartley. Please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to briefly chime in. I had the pleasure of discussing all of these programs with you during the grant review committee, the initial, I guess, the several meetings where we examined these programs. And unfortunately, because of changes to proxy rules, I'm not able to join this one. And so I did just want to sort of ask the group to sort of continue that thoughtful and robust discussions around these programs, and specifically to, ask, kind of do some careful analysis and ask meaningful questions around things like criteria and what enrollment numbers look like and what are the reasons for those enrollment numbers. And, when it comes to the budget allocations, to really remain focused on the fact that, by the definition of deflection, these programs are supposed to be community-based or they're supposed to be community-based pathways, and paying attention to where that money is going and how that money is being used, and whether that money is representative of the number of participants that programs are seeing. And so, I have the utmost trust in all of you to make the right decisions on these things. I wish I could participate, but I'm going to be excited to hear what you all have to say. So thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Grant. Was there anyone else who wished from the public who wished to make comment? I'll wait about 30 seconds in case someone's trying to come off of mute. Okay, I'm not seeing any other hands or hearing any other public comment. So thank you for all of your comments. Please do not hesitate to reach out to me via email with any further questions or concerns. And so first on our agenda today, what I want to do is provide an overview of where we are at with the tribal set aside for House Bill 4002. And that will involve a number of things. We will first review the action that's been previously taken, the ensuing tribal consultation process, the plan for the application process, and then a decision on the tribal funding table in subsequent slides. And so the first part of that I wanted to do was remind us of the action that this committee has already taken. And on April 2nd, 2024, the committee determined a set aside for tribal governments. The committee decided to set aside 10% of the total funding for the 23 to 25 biennium, which totals $2,070,819, as you see here on the right side middle of the slide. With that, the CJC then initiated tribal consultation. So to provide a little bit more information about what that looked like, on July 8th, 2024, the Oregon Criminal Justice Commission sent out a Dear Tribal Leader letter in response to the passage of House Bill 5204 in 2024, which is the identified critical event, and extended an invitation to interested tribal leaders to participate in a formal consultation. On July 30th, 2024, we then held collective consultation at which 6 tribes were present. 3 of those tribes then requested individual consultation, which occurred on August 30th, 2024, and September 27th, 2024. And as part of those individual consultations, 2 tribes preferred an even split of the money among tribes who will opt in, and 1 preferred employing a user population formula. Because we had heard these differing preferences on how to split or distribute the funds, and we had not yet heard from all tribes, we sent out another Dear Tribal Leader letter with an attached survey to solicit preference from tribes on how to split the available funds, which also served as the first step of the application process, the opt-in, which I will go into a little more detail in the upcoming slides. So first, just an overview of some of the things that we heard during tribal consultation, and they're listed here on this slide so that we can keep them in mind as we proceed. So just to summarize some of the themes, flexibility with project periods was something that came up during consultation process, as well as additional time needed for contracting. There was a preference for planning grants, as well as a preference for limited data reporting. And so this is where the consultation sort of bleeds into the application process. We released this survey soliciting preference on how to split the funds, either an even split between all of the tribal governments that opt in, which would put each tribe above the $150,000 minimum, or to apply the minimum $150,000 to all tribes that opted in, and then distribute the remaining funding to those tribes based on the Indian Health Services user population formula. And that survey also served as part 1 of the application, the opt-in. And now that we know the number of tribes who have opted in and have a consensus on which formula to employ, we can split these funds accordingly. And so in a couple of slides, we will be reviewing that funding table for your approval. And if it is approved by you all today, we can open the second part.
What? Can I use your phone? Oh, yeah.
Sorry about that. We will be opening the application ideally in December. We do anticipate making this a very simple application, and the intent is to review and make award decisions in February. This is not a competitive process, and based on this opt-in process, the tribal governments will know how much their specific tribe is allocated for budget requests. And so what you see here on the slide is a very tentative timeline of that application process, but we do aim to bring decisions before the committee in February, assuming that we can set the tribal funding table today. Okay. So with that, we can move into the specifics of what we heard from that opt-in survey. So all 9 tribes responded to the survey, and of those, 7 opted in. And the majority decision or preference was to provide the base amount of $150,000 for each tribal government that opted in, and then the remaining funding be distributed according to the formula based on the IHS user population data. And so those tribal governments that opted in are the Coquel Indian Tribe, Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde, Klamath Tribes, Confederated Tribes of Warm Springs Reservation, Confederated Tribes of Siletz Indians, Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla Indian Reservation, and Confederated Tribes of the Coos, Lower Umpqua, and Siuslaw Indians. The Cow Creek Band of the Umpqua Tribe of Indians and the Burns Paiute Tribe opted out. Before we show you the funding table, we just wanted to briefly provide an overview of that methodology again. And so the first step that we did was apply the $150,000 minimum to each of the 7 tribal governments that opted in. That was about $1,050,000. And so the remaining $1,020,819 was distributed according to the IHS user population data. And that amount, that additional amount, was added to the original $150,000 minimum. Okay, so one last slide before we take a look at that table. Since it will need your approval, I wanted us to go over the voice voting process again. And so I as staff will articulate the matter that is up for vote. There is no need for motions. Those who choose to abstain from a particular vote will announce their abstention before the ayes are taken. Those in favor will say aye or yes when prompted, and those who are opposed will say nay or no when prompted. And so on this slide, here is the breakdown of the funds for tribal governments that opted in. These figures have been rounded up for contracting purposes. And I want to pause here for questions, if there are any, before we move to a vote. Yes, Ken.
And I just also wanted to encourage folks. So CJC staff and myself and co-chair Byers have engaged in all these conversations with the tribe. So if folks have any specific questions about any of that engagement we've been going through over the past few months, I think this would be a great time to put that on the table now as well. I'm happy to answer questions.
Yes, Paul. You're on mute, Paul.
Sorry about that. Question for Director Sanchagrin. In your conversation with the tribes, has there been any conversation around partnerships with any of the counties?
Certainly there has been some tribes more directly than others. And I think it also depends on the setup of the tribe, right? So, you know, in our discussions with Warm Springs, for example, we talked both about the possibility of more of an interior focused reservation focused program, or the possibility of partnering with Jefferson County for tribal members who are encountered there. But then with some of our other tribes, I remember we were talking with Siletz, for example, there was much greater focus on, you know, learning more about what the surrounding counties were doing surrounding, you know, their tribal lands as well. So a lot of consideration there, some more direct than others. But I think that's been on the minds of most that we spoke to.
Great, thank you.
Are there any additional questions about either the tribal consultation process or the tribal allocations before we move to a vote? Okay, not seeing any. So the question before you now is whether you approve the tribal funding allocation table as presented on this slide for BHD for the 23-25 biennium. Do we have any abstentions? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 All those opposed, please say nay. So the tribal allocations would be approved. Thank you. Okay, and so changing gears just a little bit to talk about BHD adjustment requests. Every quarter, grantees have an opportunity to request an adjustment request as part of their quarterly reporting. These could be requests to change their program, their budget, or both. And during the first quarterly reporting period, which closed on October 25th of this year, we received 5 such requests. And we will review those in alphabetical order and take a vote on each one as we go through them. And then after this meeting, we as staff will notify grantees if their requests are approved or not, and then process them accordingly. What follows are summaries, but you did receive the full adjustment request as part of the meeting materials in advance of today's meeting, and we are glad if we need to reference those. Now, you will notice that these first 3 requests that we go through today are relatively minor and are requesting to move smaller amounts of money. And under impacts, we would not be reviewing these first 3 because the committee has granted staff the authority to process certain adjustments. So after we review all 5 of these today, we will revisit this concept to discuss whether or not the committee would like to grant staff that same authority for BHD amendments. So the first of these is for Baker County. And Baker County submitted a budget adjustment request for some of their training and travel funds. They had requested $7,679 for 4 individuals to attend the 2024 International Deflection and Pre-Arrest Diversion Summit in Seattle, Washington. Their team did not attend, so they would like to broaden these line items to encompass general regional trainings that are to be determined. This aligns more closely with what some other counties are doing in requesting just general training funds. And one such training that Baker County would like to backdate an expense for would be attending the House Bill 4002 symposium that occurred in May in Salem. And this would be allowable as their project period began on April 1st. And so this request is up for GRC discussion.
I've got a question, Will.
Yes, Paul.
So I don't have the full Baker County budget that was originally approved in front of me, but it seems with a couple of these requests, the amounts were pretty low. And do they not fall under the 10% threshold that does not require them to request a reallocation?
Go ahead, Ken.
I can jump in, Paul. The kind of traditional 10% flexibility that staff has that you're used to with the CJC Commission, that is something that each governing body has to actively give to staff. And so that's what Will was mentioning in the beginning. We wanted to be as cautious and transparent as possible so that the impacts committee for our high utilizer grant has granted staff that flexibility to basically to consider amendment requests that fall under 10% of their grant amount and also do not make substantive program changes. And we plan to ask the committee for that leave today as well for BHD, but we have not technically obtained that so far. And so we figured we would bring these full, all of the amendment requests to the committee today and then ask for the future ability to do those administrative changes given, under those confines. But yeah, it's not very often we consider $7,000 changes as a committee.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Was there any additional discussion for Baker County? I don't want to cut anyone off. I'm hearing none. So the question before you now is whether you approve Baker County's adjustment request as presented on this slide. Do we have any abstentions? Not hearing any abstentions. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Thank you. All those opposed, please say nay. Okay. Hearing no nays, that would be approved. Thank you. Okay. Moving next, we have Deschutes County. And Deschutes County submitted a budget adjustment request to move around some supply funding. They request that $2,000 of their previously approved $6,500 line item for Narcan be moved within the supplies to two other previously approved line items, a portable workstation for the coordinator, as well as office and printing supplies also for the coordinator. The reason being that the cost for both of these, the workstation and the printer and office supplies, has been coming in higher than anticipated, and the need for Narcan is not as great as anticipated. And so this request is up for GRC discussion. Okay, just want to give an opportunity if there's any discussion about this, and if not, we can proceed to the vote. Okay, not hearing discussion. So the question before you now is whether you approve Deschutes County's adjustment request as presented here on the slide. Do we have any abstentions?
This is Steve Gunnels, I abstain.
Thank you. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 All those opposed, please say nay. Hearing no nays, then Deschutes County's adjustment request would be approved. Thank you. Okay, next up, and we're right here in the middle, so we're making good time. Malheur County submitted a budget adjustment request to move funds from their coordinator position in personnel to training and travel so that their coordinator could attend the PTAC conference that just occurred in Seattle. These funds would be backdated if approved. And so this request is up for GRC discussion. Hearing none so far, but I will give just another brief moment in case there's someone coming off of mute. Okay, so just to get the question before you now is whether you approve Malheur County's adjustment request as presented here on the slide. Do we have any abstentions? Okay. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 All those who oppose, please say nay. Hearing no nays, so Malheur County's adjustment request would be approved. Thank you. Okay, and so for these next two amendment requests, we have asked the representative from the county to be on the line in case there are questions that staff cannot answer. Washington County's representative will not be able to join us until right at 9:30. And so I'm hoping that our timing will work out if there is a need. But better yet, let's just pause for Washington County and come down to Yamhill County and do that one so we can be sure that representatives are on the line, if that's okay with the committee. So we're just going to go one out of order and switch to Yamhill right quick. Perfect. Okay, thank you so much for your grace. So Yamhill County submitted a budget adjustment request to reallocate $7,567.02 within personnel to include roll-up costs, which include things like unemployment, disability, etc., for their Sheriff Services Coordinator position, which is the program coordinator. Their original budget included some of these roll-up costs, but not all. And those funds would come from a reduction in the Health and Human Services Specialist 1 position from 17 months to 16 months. And then the HHS has agreed to cover that month. They have also identified the need to increase their Deputy District Attorney 2 position from 0.5 FTE to 0.75 FTE. They state they need to increase this FTE because they are seeing an actual engagement rate of around 12%, creating more of a workload than initially expected for the district attorney's office. And they will do this by decreasing the DDA2 position from 17 months to 16 months, as they are still hiring for that position. They will, as I mentioned, reduce the HHS specialist position by 1 month, which HHS has agreed to cover. And then there's a reduction in the training budget. They are requesting to remove the HHS vehicle from their budget, and HHS will instead use a county vehicle to perform deflection duties. They are also requesting to remove their furniture line items and the finance specialist position, and the program coordinator would take up those duties. And so this request is up for GRC discussion. Hearing no discussion so far, but I will continue to pause for just a moment in case there is someone coming off of mute.
Hello, I can't find, oh, there's my hand.
Judge Shanti.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so unfortunately I only have one screen right now, so I can't go back and look at what their original plan was. And I can't bring up the more detailed information that you sent for this meeting. But you said they say there's a 12% increase over what they anticipated. Did they talk about how many individuals that actually is?
Judge Shanti, I believe what I said was that the engagement rate is about 12%. And so I think it may be more that the people may not be retained in the program.
Okay, so I guess what I'm trying to do is figure this out. So they wanted a half-time deputy DA, but they expected less than 12% engagement rate.
I believe that they expected a higher rate than that. And that since that rate is lower than anticipated, fewer people are potentially retained in the program over time, which could increase the work of the DDA position in the next step in the system.
That's what I'm trying to understand. If they're not engaging, why does the DDA need more time? I'm trying to understand how their program works. And like, if they're engaging less than they expected, why are they asking for more money for 0.75 DDA position?
Again, my understanding is that DDA position would be to potentially pursue the criminal legal consequences versus the program.
All right, so this gets me back to what I feel like we never really resolved, which is what we are trying to do with this grant, and it has to do with deflection versus prosecution. And so what they're saying is we have this program where we're offering people an out, But if they don't take the out, then we're going to prosecute them. And as a result of that, since they're not taking the out, we need more money to prosecute them. Is that basically it in a nutshell?
Yes.
Yes, Judge Shanti, I believe that may be potentially
All
in a
right.
nutshell.
So then that makes me wonder, let's say we didn't even have this program. Would they not be prosecuting them because they don't have a DA to prosecute them? In other words, are we using this money to prosecute drug offenders as opposed to actually divert them? I'm just a little, like, I look at what the statute's intention is, which is, I think, deflection. And we had that whole discussion, which we never resolved, about is it diversion or deflection, or is it both? But if we get to the point where now they're asking for more money for a DA to prosecute, then I'm thinking, okay, well, what if we didn't have this program? Would they not get prosecuted? How would the DA prosecute all these people? Because then it feels more like we're just providing money to prosecute people rather than providing money for all the community services and the outreach and all of that. So it's not really, this is not a Yamhill problem necessarily, but it's kind of a unresolved systemic problem in what we're doing.
Paul, I see your hand up. I also have the narrative for the original budget that could shed some light, Judge Shanti, if you would like for me to read that briefly.
Yeah, that would be great.
So this specific position, referencing the DDA2 position, will handle all criminal matters related to our diversion programs. If subjects enter the program and are not successful, they will pursue criminal charges under law revisions. They will coordinate communications and complete legal courses of action, and then represent the county and county proceedings.
Right. So that, thank you for reading that, because that's what I suspected. And I don't really want to put a monkey wrench in the works, but I have been very troubled by how we proceeded in the first place, because we never resolved this question about whether this money is deflection or diversion or both. And this request points up the problem, for me anyway, in just the conceptual motivation behind this grant money, which is we are now looking at providing more money for prosecution. But this is not a prosecution grant. This is not money. We're not, the legislature, if I got it right, I could have it wrong, did not say we've got to prosecute more people with substance use disorders or mental health disorders. It said in the wake of getting rid of 110, we've got to do something to try to reach out to these people and not have them get in the system. And this extra money that Yamhill's asking for, to me, shows the problem and how we've proceeded, because now what we're doing is we're giving more money to bring the people in the system. If we didn't even have the program, perhaps the DAs wouldn't even prosecute because they wouldn't have the DAs to do it. So again, I'm just confused, and I'm still trying to get my mind around this. So I've talked enough, and I see Paul wants to talk, so I'll be quiet now.
Yeah, I share some of the same concerns that Judge Shanti brought up. Given the 12% engagement rate, if their engagement rate was 2% or 5%, what are we actually funding? To me, this seems to be a pretty big issue around the intent of these funds to deflect people and pay for services and supports, including within the DA's office, to administer deflection, but to pay for prosecution, particularly when it looks like over 85% of the people who are eligible are going to be prosecuted potentially, does not seem like a good use of these funds.
Yes, Jeremiah.
Thank you. Certainly understand the concerns that have been raised. I guess from a slightly different perspective, we're 75 days in. We have a lot of anecdotal information right now as to what's occurring with deflection, with prosecution. We're seeing everything from deflection being utilized all the way through to individuals skipping the conditional discharge and requesting to go straight to formal probation for 18 months as sort of an avoidance of having to go through all of the steps that I think the bill purposely put in place to ensure that there were avenues out of the criminal justice system. So I think I don't want to overreact to the early data and would like to see us give flexibility to counties right now to continue to do these level of adjustments, slight increases, slight decreases across the board as they're starting to get their earliest data rolling in. Thank you.
Yes, Ken, I think your hand was up first.
This is not necessarily a comment to the merits of the request, but one thing I did want to just point out, we're going to have a presentation by our friends at OHSU about data coming up at the end of this meeting, and that's going to be at the state level. But I know some of the internal preliminary information that we've been getting at CJC indicates that Yamhill County, I think, has had maybe not, they haven't had the most folks referred into their program, or at least entered into REDCap. But certainly for a county their size, they have been far and above the driver of some of our enrollments. And so that doesn't by itself justify a 12% retention rate. But it does show that, maybe similar to what Jeremiah was mentioning, as they're trying to set the calipers as to who they enroll in their program. So far, they've set it very wide. And so that may be partially responsible for what appears to be a relatively high washout rate. But I would share Jeremiah's caution, just that we're early. All of this data is very preliminary. And so the counties probably do need to have an opportunity to figure out what direction they want to move in. That being said, I actually share a lot of the concerns that were raised by Judge Shanti and by Paul as well, that while deputy DAs are an allowable expense under the program, I think a lot of what we were focused on funding through the summer were DA positions, as was mentioned, to be more of an administrative, play an administrative role, not necessarily a prosecutorial role. And so while I'm not sure how I would vote yet, this one does give me pause that we would be potentially giving more funds toward the prosecution of failures, as opposed to perhaps beefing up the program to improve the retention rate.
Sam?
Thank you. I think, Ken, you sort of summarized in some ways some of my, I share the concerns. I know we're early, but it is an interesting place to be, where we're funding, sort of the DA's office more in the early stages. And I am wondering, we have sort of grappled with how much has gone to the district attorney role or the district attorney office, even in the beginning. And I am wondering if, as we continue to see shifts and counties recalibrating, is that an area that we can ask, like, what exactly is the need for the increase, right? Is there an increased administration to get people, administrative costs coming in to get people through deflection, or not? And I know the data, as you said, will show that, but it is an interesting place to put more money, I think, given everything that is allowable. But I do think it's a point of confusion, and it has been for us. And that might be a budget line that we could get more information on, as people are asking for that.
Yes, Steve Gunnels.
Yeah, I think the overall aim of 4002 was to get people into treatment. And the first option is deflection. It sounds like Yamhill is making a good go of that with very little buy-in by the potential participants. The next step is diversion, and then the next step is probation to get people in one way or another to go to treatment. So the diversion and the probation aspect of that of 4002 require a prosecutor, and the recriminalization of drugs is putting pressure on DA's offices around the state to pick up the extra cases, and the number of cases is actually lower in Deschutes County than I had anticipated it would be. That's partly due to a high success rate in our deflection program, but it's also partly due to a lower number of arrests for possession than had been my experience in 2019. And maybe that number is ramping up, and maybe it's going to stay low, but that, I think, Yamhill County, it sounds like, is experiencing a higher rate of PCS arrests than we are here in Deschutes County.
Yes, Ken.
I wonder if other members of the committee would like to hear from Yamhill County. We do have someone, I believe Carol Ann, on the meeting. If the committee would like to hear from them, maybe I'll see if anybody would object. I at least see Paul nodding yes, but he's the only one I can see. Hearing no objections, Carol Ann, if you have any thoughts or anything you'd like to add, please go ahead.
Hi, good morning, and thank you. I would like to add that the DDA doesn't just do the prosecution. Once the citation is issued, there also has to be a decline. So every case that comes through, they're going to handle whether the client goes into treatment and stays in treatment, or they go through the court system to conditional discharge. We are seeing quite a few FTAs. So those DDAs are handling the cases. I think we've had 26 FTAs. So they're handling the case more than once. They have to take it back, amend it, file a warrant. So I think that that's where they're seeing the increases. They had anticipated 25% of our total deflections would actually go into treatment, and that's where we're only seeing 12% right now. And we're going to be meeting here in the next couple of weeks to review our process right now and see what we can do to get more into treatment before they go to the court system.
And Carol Ann, if I could ask real quick, is that gap between 12% and the expected 25%, is that tied to the FTA issue that you just identified, or is that tied to, an lack of availability of treatment resources? Or I'm just curious if you all have any thoughts on why we have that 13 percentage point gap there.
From what I'm seeing, and I certainly am not, not the subject matter expert just yet, but from what I see lacking in our program is a better warm handoff of handing the person their citation and their instructions, but then actually getting them to the treatment and not expecting them to take themselves to treatment. We have people that are doing it, which is fantastic. But I think that that's where our program is weaker than I would hope.
Thank you.
Paul?
Carolyn, maybe you could help refresh my memory, because I don't have a copy of the original budget. What was the total allocation? Was it just 0.5 for the DDA position? Was that all
Correct.
you had in the original budget?
Yes.
Okay, great. That's helpful. Thank you.
Mhm.
Judge Shanti?
Yes, so what I'm interested in knowing, if you know even, after the FTA, okay, so then they bring the people back or whatever, and they get to the prosecution stage. So actually filing charges for possession, or and then maybe the person decides to go to trial, or maybe they plead. But is the money in this grant being used to follow through to the end of the criminal proceeding? In other words, it doesn't stop once they're out of your guys' program, like they don't show up, there's an FTA, and then the DA gets to decide, are they going to file FTA charges and then possession charges? Or are they going to just ignore it? What are they going to do? At that point, do they, if they follow through, is it coming out of the funding for the deflection diversion program that you guys have started up?
I believe so. Right now, we've had a few that have engaged and then they disappear. Our HHS department continues to reach out to them. If they are failing and they're going through the system, you know, our hope is to put them on a conditional discharge so they can either do their treatment before going to court or they can do their treatment after going to court. And then, yes, it does go back, and it is through the funding that HHS is working with these people.
All right.
Does that answer your question?
A little bit. So,
Okay.
So in your opinion, and I know you're not from are you from the DA's office?
Years ago, but not now.
Not
No.
now. Okay. So, it's probably too early to measure how much of the DA's work is being used for that post-failure prosecution. But I'm wondering if you're going to track that, number one, and then the second question is, what would happen if you didn't have the program? Would the DA, would the DA prosecute these people, or just like, I really don't want this program to turn into more money for the DA to prosecute. I appreciate that they probably have a lot more pressure now because they've got prosecution of cases that they didn't have before, but the legislature didn't say, here's some money to prosecute. The legislature said, let's get some money to not prosecute. So do you know what would happen if you didn't have the program? These 80% of these people that are being in the program that don't engage?
I believe that they would all be prosecuted and that they probably wouldn't have the options that they have right now. I'm confident that our DA system here does not want to see them go through, and we are giving them every effort to get into treatment to prevent them from going through. So.
All right, thank you.
Yes, Paul.
So a comment and a point of clarification. First, I appreciate that Yamhill County, it actually is bringing a good number of people into deflection and want to support their efforts. I am really stuck on using money for prosecution. So, and this is where I'd like a point of clarification. Is this an allowable use? If a county came to us and said, you know, we want a full-time DA just to prosecute, would that be an allowable expense?
Avery, do you know that one off the top of your head? I'm also looking.
Just based off of like our grant administration guide, yes, I think it is up to you all as the committee to determine what you would like to fund. Obviously, a portion of this position you all did choose to fund back in August.
Mhm. Well, I would suggest that the committee gets clear on this issue, because I don't suspect that this is the first or the last that we're going to see of these type of requests.
Judge Shanti, I believe you're next, and then I see your hand as well, Janie.
I just want to second what Paul said. I can see it's just stumbling through this very issue till the end of the funding cycle. And then even at the end of the funding cycle, if we get money for the next time, we're going to have to resolve this unless the legislature does something different. I mean, I did reach out to Senator Przansky and told him that I thought there was confusion in the actual definitions in the legislation about, you know, I told him about our confusion about diversion, deflection, and how that, if you take the whole statute and you look at the whole thing in totality, you might come up with one interpretation, and then also if you focus on just a few things, you might come up with another. So I was, I mean, maybe the legislatures will fix it, but unless and until they fix it, I think we have to come up with what we're going to do, because otherwise we are going to stumble through the same issue, just like Paul said. So I'm in favor of let's hash it out and see if we can hash it out today.
Janie, I believe you were next.
Thank you. I may be jumping into the weeds, but I think that it helps tell the story. And so with only a 12% engagement rate, I am curious about, and again, I'm with Judge Shanti. I don't have the original application in front of me, but what is that? What are the tools of engagement that are being offered on the front end? Is there robust enough connection, follow-up, initial engagement by non-law enforcement deflection, such as peers or case managers, things like that? And would the money be better invested in that front end? And if not, what I think I'm hearing is that this increase in the DA FTE is to offer other options that are alternatives to actual prosecution. Whereas if this program didn't exist, this middle sort of offering of, you didn't do deflection correctly the first time, so we're going to offer you a second layer of second pathway and a third pathway that doesn't go right to just prosecution in same as good old days, right? So, and that was tongue in cheek. So I guess that's where I need 2 points of clarification. What's on the front end, and is this increase in DA an offer of something that would not exist, be it for this deflection 4002?
I see Ken's hand is raised.
Oh, I was pausing. I thought those were questions directed to Carol Ann, and so I'm not sure if she has thoughts. I didn't want to interrupt any answers, so I'll wait.
Sorry about that. I was visiting with my undersheriff. He's trying to call in to help answer some questions also. He's asking if you can unmute him, Avery.
Which number is he? I see 8001 and 0980. Okay.
That's him, 8001.
I don't think I can unmute.
Does he just need to hit *6? Is that how he does it, Avery?
I'm not sure,
Well, maybe
but
we
let's
could
try it.
*6.
Oh, it worked. That worked.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Well, if I'm allowed to talk, I would love to.
Go
So
ahead.
I'm Under Sheriff Bowdle. I'm Under Sheriff Bowdle. I appreciate you guys meeting to discuss this matter. Initially when we put in for this grant, there was plenty of other counties that were asking for full-time BDAs, maybe 2. Obviously, that's probably based on size and whatnot. It kind of feels like we're really getting down in the weeds of something that's so new, and we're going through it and experiencing something we've never done before. And I think going from half a DDA to 0.75 doesn't really seem like that big of a lift to me. Obviously, I'm not the committee, and we'll go with whatever recommendation you guys give us. But I just honestly feel like there's other counties that we opted in early as far as getting our program up and going. We were meeting for months. We got this thing on the ground. Obviously, there's going to be changes that come about. I feel like we're being hamstringed a little bit, and we're kind of nitpicking our program. When at the end of the day, I really truly feel like we're going to end up having one of the best programs in the state based on our mutual cooperation with HHS and our DA's office. I would really hate to see us cut, not allow us for the adjustment, and based on other applications that I've seen and listened to in the last meetings you guys had for the approvals. But anyways, we'll go with whatever you say. I appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And Ken, before you speak, one thing, we did take a moment and pull up House Bill 4002, and deputy district attorneys deflection program expenses can include but are not limited to law enforcement employees, as well as deputy district attorneys, behavioral health treatment, and others. So it is allowable expense. But Ken? Or Paul? I'm sorry.
No, Ken's next.
All I was going to say is that, and maybe it's just a quick reminder to folks, just how we've worked in the past. I know that we've had a number of very robust discussions over the years for our other impacts grant on some of these amendments, and we don't always resolve them at the meeting that we are having like today. And so if we were, I think another option is we could table this amendment, and whether it's to gather more information for our upcoming meeting in a month or two, or I hear very loud and clear the concerns of the committee that we would like to have some clarification. And I think it's not so much as to whether a DDA is an allowable expense, because I think the statute is quite clear there. However, I think that what we're really talking about is what role we should be funding through or as a DDA. And so I would actually advocate for us tabling this issue so that CJC staff can get some clarification from our DOJ attorneys as to whether this committee, whether via administrative rule or just through its decision making, can set parameters around what the role of an allowable expense category is. I would be very cautious about doing that today. I know that's what Judge Shanti had suggested. However, I think that if we were able to put that as a line item on our upcoming meeting, and like I said, perhaps even initiate a true public rulemaking process on that to make sure that we're being very clear, we're being very transparent, and trying to draw some bright lines, that may be beneficial. But I also would not want to just think that, for Yamhill County's sake, if we either punted or if we even rejected, that oftentimes that results in discussions with a county, not necessarily just go back to the drawing board. Usually there's a way we can cure the concerns to a certain extent. So that would just be one suggestion that I would make, just based on what we've done in the past in this committee.
Judge Shanti.
I thought, Paul, did you want to say something? You were next.
I didn't raise my hand.
Okay.
I guess but I would say I support Ken's suggestion. I think we need to put some more time and thought into how we think about these types of requests and what's allowable and whether we can create more structure within the allowable use of personnel.
All right, well, what I was going to say in response is it might be good to have a whole meeting that's just designed to hash this all out. But Ken, I would say that if you're going to go talk to a DOJ lawyer, as a matter of principle, whether the DA is going to be funded for prosecution, let's just say that that's the question, is really no different than in grants. If you've got, it's an allowable funding for a vehicle and someone wants a Rolls Royce. What is the, if the principle is that any allowable expense can be funded and the committee does not have authority to say, well, it's an allowable expense, but we're not going to fund that. If we don't have that authority, then it's like, I forget who said it, the opening day of our considering of the grants, their view was if your staff had approved everything, there's nothing for us to do except for rubber stamp it, because all the funding met the basic criteria, which is one of these categories of things you could fund for. Now, I personally think of the committee as more of that we are entrusted with public funds, and so we're supposed to make sure that they're well spent. And there's a list of categories that you could spend money on. Some of it is like, for instance, mental health is listed on there, but very few of these grant applications include anything that have to do with mental health. So if you want to go to the DOJ and find out what our role is, maybe if it's because there's a criteria and because it's that kind of grant that is already, the money is already allocated by formula, maybe we're not supposed to do anything but rubber stamp it if the committee, if your staff says it meets the criteria. Otherwise, I don't think the question should be as narrow as, do we just fund DAs to prosecute? But maybe it's a broader question of what is our authority across the board to say, well, yeah, this is a category, but we're not going to give money to that. Anyway, I'll agree that we should just table this till the next meeting. If we can get another meeting up before, the next time we come back and look at the changes in the requests.
Yeah, thank you, Judge Shanti. I would just say that I think you and I actually agree on most points. I'm just overly cautious when it comes to these types of decisions, so we don't open ourselves up to protests and then to continued discussions on these items. And so I think a lot of what I would like to obtain and then provide to the committee is perhaps the guardrails. How much flexibility do we have? Because I think some of the questions you raised are open questions. And so that's what I would intend to do, not just to ask them on this one narrow issue, but to try to give us a better foothold on, as we discussed it in the summer, we have rulemaking authority for this grant, and which we did not do because we've been trying to focus on getting these programs functioning as quickly as possible, which is what the legislature directly told me they wanted to do. But as we move into doing rulemaking to try to provide some more predictability and transparency for grantees and for all, I think knowing what lanes or how the width of the lanes would be really important. And so we can begin that process. And this may be, it sounds like it's the most discussed item that we should probably start with.
I'm hearing that the committee may like to table this request until the next meeting, and so that staff can get additional clarification. Is there a consensus on that, or would anyone object to tabling the request? Okay, I'm seeing no objections to that. Okay. So we have one additional adjustment request. We're going backwards to Washington County. Bear with me one moment.
well, aren't we going to vote on Yamhill, or are we just tabling the whole thing? I mean, I don't know really what we're doing now.
Well, I guess my thought was we didn't necessarily need to have a vote to not consider, to not consider something. But if Judge Shanti, you would prefer that we actually take a vote on tabling it, then we're perfectly fine with doing that.
No, I was just trying to get clarification that we can table Yamhill and have this issue, or we could vote on Yamhill and then have the issue and figure it out. I don't.
I think
was
we
just
could go
trying
either
to,
way.
yeah, I was just trying to figure out what we were doing because we just moved on to Washington. And my guess is if we table Yamhill, we're going to end up tabling Washington because it's the same issues.
So we can absolutely use the voice vote process about tabling Yamhill if that is what the committee would like to do.
Let's go ahead and call that vote, please.
All right, but wait, let me clarify. So I see these as two different issues, and my brains might not be working today, or maybe it never works. There's a broader issue that we've just discussed about our authority that applies to all of the grant applications and all of the future requests for changes. And then there's these individual folks that have asked right now for a change. And so is the proposal, Ken, that you had, which is we table all like Yamhill and then have that discussion all in one and then vote on Yamhill at the end of the discussion after you get clarification and we figure out what the parameters of our authority are? Was that your proposal?
I guess I was thinking that we would just vote on Yamhill and then at least give Washington County an initial look. I believe that at least portions of Washington County's requests are different than Yamhill County's, more focused on where they're housing their data reporting.
Yeah.
So I think it would be good to at least give Washington County a chance to discuss with us as opposed to table both just in a single vote. We may end up with the same result, but I think.
Ken, I think I'm just not getting my point across. So your proposal is we table Yamhill and we have this meeting and then we vote on Yamhill, as opposed to we vote on Yamhill and we still have the meeting. The meeting to discuss the parameters of our authority, we have to have. If we voted on Yamhill today, I would be emailing you. Let's have a meeting to discuss these parameters. That's all I was trying to figure out. We're tying Yamhill to our meeting.
I think that. Yeah, right. I guess maybe
Okay.
I'm getting confused. Whether we actually just table Yamhill or if we even voted to reject Yamhill, they could still come back and ask us these questions again. And so I think that regardless, we will need to have a meeting in the future, hopefully soon, to discuss the parameters of what we're willing to fund. And I think it would be very beneficial for Yamhill to come back after that once we have that clarification. But maybe I'm failing to see a little bit of the nuance there. But I think that regardless of what we do, we need to have another meeting to try to be more specific on some of these items that have been really tripping us up the entire time.
Right. Okay. So then I guess I would make a motion to table Yamhill.
And would anybody like to second the motion to table Yamhill County?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Paul. Any further discussion? Sorry, Ash, I don't know why I called you Ash. This is just how your name shows up, Will.
No worries, Ken. Is there any additional discussion? Yes, Jeremiah.
Yeah, I won't be able to support that motion. I think we have gone through the discussions of what our authority and responsibility are. I feel like we continually sort of are challenged individually around what is acceptable within the broad definition of a deflection program in a system versus what all of us within our own individual expertise would like to see. And through our experiences of working with individuals struggling with substance abuse, I think we have a responsibility to move these pieces forward and to take a vote. We've had robust discussion. We've heard from Yamhill County, and I would like to see us complete our responsibility today. Thank you.
Sam?
Thank you. I would just say from my perspective, I'm not sure that we're clear on whether deflection and diversion is the same thing, two sides of sides of the same coin. I don't think we've been clear on that, and it has sat around particular positions, especially district attorneys, really out of the idea of deflection, at least from my perspective is, there'd be no involvement with a legal system, right, in deflection. And so, while I agree we've had great discussion, I do think I agree with Ken that we need a separate meeting to really set our sort of bottom lines on things, or at least to articulate it more clearly. So we don't find ourselves in spaces like this where we just can't wrap our brains around how to come together on a vote to move to shift money. So that would just be my perspective, and I don't think based on how we have reviewed things, and I think we gave a lot of space as people were planning and trying to figure it out, but I'm not sure that we could articulate ourselves how we see deflection. And if it's so broad that it includes diversion, then I'm wondering if we just have a new word that really doesn't serve merit. So, and I don't think that was the intention of 4002, Thank you.
Thank you. I believe Rep. Conrad is next.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I appreciate the discussion. And, I want to echo the fact that, some sort of consensus decision-making rubric needs to be agreed upon, and or some of the base assumptions and or some of the latitudes. So with that, Ken, I don't know if the CJC has a bill or if you want somebody just to drop a bill so that if this committee wants the legislature to take action and clarify some of these definitions or the guidelines based off of your conversations with DOJ, whoever else, just so that can be done in the session. I think the next meeting for here is probably going to be in April. I won't be part of that, so this is my last meeting with this group. But let me know if you want me to do it, or talk to Croft or somebody so that the legislature can act and provide the guidance to this group that is necessary. The other thing that I haven't heard, if Yamhill and potentially, if Washington has some of the same issues, what are the ramifications to them if nothing is voted on today? Are they going to be hindered? Are they going to be set back until the next meeting and until the next vote and not be able to advance their programs and continue on? So if anybody knows the answer to what the ramifications are if these requests get tabled today, I'd be curious to hear that as well. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Rep. Conrad. Dr. Brigham?
Thank you. I just wanted to make a comment that I think this is an expense we already approved. And if I'm understanding the request, it's just to shift some money around into a line item that we had already approved. It's just more money for that purpose. I think the rationale that was given for doing that has aggravated this lingering question we have. So I would lean towards voting, and I would vote for the request just because I don't want to micromanage their project. I think, if they had said 3/4 instead of half a position or whatever in the original application, I think that we would have funded that. We already funded this use of money. And I do think the meeting is important and we need to get clarity on this, but that my own sense is that we're really just having some difficulty with the rationale they gave for it, but it's an allowable expense. It's expense we approved previously. And in that sense, to me, it's just moving some money around. And so anyway, just wanted to make that comment.
Thank you, Dr. Brigham. Is there additional discussion? Yes, Jane. Oh, yes, Jane.
Yeah, I mean, as much as I think, yes, we need this additional meeting, I agree. This is something we approved in the first round after lots of robust discussion. And I think a lot of this will get flushed out in the in our meeting. Is it in January or February, Ken? Where we're actually looking at programming and the reports and I think that meeting in between, that we get clarity and find some consensus as a group so that we don't go down the rabbit hole every time is kinder to everyone involved. Even though I may personally, have some challenges with even the original intent. I think, yeah, we agreed to fund this, and this is just an increase in a little bit more FTE. So thanks.
Yes, Paul.
So I just want to state that I absolutely want to see Yamhill County's program funded. I think this is less about Yamhill County and more about precedents. And I appreciate Dr. Brigham's comments. Yes, we did fund this before at the 0.5 FTE, but the rationale that they gave this time was for prosecution. And I think this is a big issue that we need to decide on. And I want to support Yamhill County's request to get all of the money. But if I were to vote right now, I would vote no. And I would rather us figure out kind of what the precedent is going to be moving forward rather than pushing a vote right now.
Thank you, Paul. Is there any additional discussion?
So Will, I'm hearing that there is a motion to table Yamhill County's request. So I believe, Ken, that we need to vote on that regardless of if we.
Yeah, let's call the vote on that. And then if we do not table, then we can move on to voting on the merits of the application or of the amendment request.
Okay, sounds good. So I'm going to go ahead and call roll on that. So the motion is to table Yamhill County's request. Sam Byers.
Yes.
Ken Sanchagrin.
Yes.
Judge Shanti.
Yes.
Jeremiah Stromberg.
No.
Liz Weber.
Yes.
Steve Gunnels. I'm sorry, was that a no?
The no.
Thank you. Chief Harnden.
No.
Stacy Brubaker.
No.
Dr. Brigham.
No.
Sheriff Landers.
No.
Janie Gullickson.
Could you repeat the motion, please? I'm sorry.
Yeah, no problem. The motion is to table Yamhill County's request.
No.
RJ Navarro. He might have dropped off. Michelle Mason.
Yes.
Paul Solomon.
Yes.
I believe that does not pass, but give me 1 minute to count again. Okay, I'm seeing 6 yes and 7 no, so it does not pass.
Thank you, Avery. So the motion to table did not pass. So we would we like to do a roll call vote for this then, for the amendment?
I think so, unless there's any further discussion. It's only because I see Paul's hand up. I mean, I think we've discussed it pretty deeply, but yeah, I didn't want to not acknowledge that hand.
The question I'd ask, Ken, is if we do go ahead with this, would we still have a meeting to discuss? I mean, I think we need to kind of get clear on this issue, regardless of whether we approve Yamhill County's request today or not.
Yes, whether we, so just for the folks on the call to know, our plan has been on our quarterly kind of cadence. Our next planned meeting would be February. And so whether we do an additional meeting in January only on this topic, or if we roll it into a meeting in February, yes, I think this is something we need to discuss, or at least have an opportunity again for staff to provide guidance as to what is the breadth of our authority given the way the statute is constructed.
Thank you, Ken, for the answer. Okay, is there a motion?
Well, I guess I thought we haven't done motions for the others as far as the approval on the merits, and so I think that that's where we're at, that we should call the vote on the merits of Yamhill County's proposal.
Absolutely. So the question before you now is whether you approve Yamhill County's adjustment request as presented here on the slide. Are there any abstentions? Not hearing abstentions. So all those in favor, please say aye.
Oh, roll call.
Oh, roll call
Yeah,
vote. Sorry about that.
Okay, so I will go ahead and call roll. Sorry, Will. Sam Byers,
No.
Ken Sanchagrin,
Yes.
Judge Shanti,
No.
Jeremiah Stromberg,
Yes.
Liz Weber,
Yes.
Steve Gunnels,
Yes.
Chief Harnden.
Yes.
Stacy Brubaker,
Yes.
Dr. Brigham,
Yes.
Sheriff Landers,
Yes.
Janie Gullickson.
Yes.
Okay, RJ, I think he's still dropped off, but just in case, RJ. Okay, Michelle Mason
No.
and Paul Solomon.
No.
Okay, I believe that passes, but let's just count. Yes, so that passes. So Yamhill County's adjustment request for Q1 has been approved.
Thank you, Avery. Okay, so we do have one additional adjustment request, and that is from Washington County. And so Washington County has identified several needs as their program came online. And so there's largely two big parts to this, and it's on the left and right side of the slide respectively. And so I just wanted to make sure you knew that in advance. So whenever I cue to the second part, that's on the right side. So first on the left, within personnel, Washington County identified the need to add a program specialist that would be housed in Health and Human Services and is intended to assist with data management, which includes preparing data for the statewide data system, as well as preparing data visualizations, policies, and procedures at a more local level so that the program can retain transparency with the community and foster additional buy-in. And originally, the program coordinator was going to do this work for HHS, but since learning of the data requirement reporting, they no longer think this is feasible. And so in that same train of thought, they are thinking or needing to reclassify their approved legal specialist 2 position to a senior legal specialist 2 position. And that person will be responsible for tracking and eligibility documentation for the statewide data system reporting and referral to the deflection program housed in the DA's office. And so originally they had not intended for this position to need to navigate multiple systems. And so they are needing to pivot with this reclassification. And additionally, they omitted a request to pay for their program coordinator before the program became live or online. So they are requesting to backdate funds for their program coordinator for a period of April through August, part-time. And finally, the county has seen an increased need to continue to develop their team and would like to reallocate funds to attend trainings, to be determined in the future which specific trainings. And so in order to accomplish this, they are redistributing costs within personnel. They are requesting to reduce the sheriff's office lieutenant from a 1.0 FTE to 0.8 FTE because the number of hours worked by the position are less than they expected. They have also had some delays in hiring for the program coordinator, and so there is a cost savings there. And finally, as I already mentioned, the legal specialist 2 was removed to reclassify it as a senior legal specialist. And so that's the first part of the adjustment request that was on the left. And so we're moving to the right side of the screen now. And the second part here is a request to redistribute funds that were previously awarded to contractual services. So they had requested 3 peer mentors in their original budget, one of which has yet to be hired. And they do anticipate hiring a 3rd peer for about 5 to 6 months of the program, but they do not yet have enough participants to support that need just yet. And so with those funds, they would like to add in translation services, client flex funds, which can like contractor provided cell phones and other participant support items like bus tickets, clothing, ID cards, and Washington County anticipates that the removal of these barriers will increase participant engagement. And so the expectation is that by having this contract, the county would be able to offer the peer case managers the opportunity to quickly respond to emerging client needs and also use these as contingency management tools for ongoing connection. And so as I mentioned previously, that data tracking component at the local level, but also in the statewide data system is a larger lift than they anticipated. And so they are requesting data tracking software. And finally, they would also like to add some materials and supplies for program functioning. These are things like iPads, laptops, and other supplies that do not meet the definition of equipment, but will support their community-based outreach as well as data tracking. And so this request is up for GRC discussion. Yes, Ken.
Oh, I would actually be happy to let Judge Shanti go first. We raised our hands at almost the exact same time.
Of course, Judge Shanti.
Well, I'm just was trying to follow what your explanation was. I thought you said that they wanted more money for the program coordinator because they forgot to ask for the pre-deflection program coordinator pay, but then they were taking money from a budget item for the program coordinator because that person didn't get hired. So I didn't understand.
Yeah, I can take this one if you don't mind, Will. It's a little bit of a language issue. So the program navigator, they actually have 2 program coordinators, but one of those is actually in their description called a program navigator. So it's a reduction of 4 months to the program navigator position, not actually the coordinator. But great question.
All right, so they want money. They're taking money from the program navigator because they didn't get the person hired. They want more money for the program coordinator And then they want to put more money into a different position that was originally part of the program coordinator, but now they think they need another position because the program coordinator can't do it all. Is that a nutshell what they're doing?
Yes, that's correct. I will say the pre-deflection program coordinator was serving a different role. So that is like for the April through August part-time segment, that's a different role than their existing coordinator. But they're hoping to backdate expenses for that pre-deflection program coordinator. But yes, you're correct.
Thank you.
And I was just going to comment that I'll be supportive of this request. We have been trying to work closely with Washington County. They've encountered some challenges that they didn't anticipate from the data reporting side. So I'm really speaking towards the legal specialist position and then also the funding of the new program specialist. That's largely tied to making sure that reporting can occur to CJC in an effective way, and especially overcoming CJIS HIPAA nuances and issues that were not anticipated before. A lot of this came up once the red cap data fields were identified. That's where this pivot began.
Is there additional discussion for Washington County? Not seeing additional hands. Oh, yes, Paul.
No, I would just move that we approve the request from Washington County.
I'll second.
So we should roll call that, Avery. Is that true?
I'm not sure if we need to roll call. Ken, do you know?
Let's just do a voice vote, and unless it sounds close, then we can just proceed with the voice vote.
Absolutely. Okay, so the motion that was made was to approve Washington County's adjustment request. Are there any abstentions? I see one abstention.
Yes, thank you.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
All those who oppose, please say nay. Okay, not hearing the nay. So Washington County's adjustment request would be approved for Q1. Okay, so that brings us, at least for now, to the end of the adjustment requests. So we would like to take a moment, as we sort of previewed earlier, to discuss that review process that we previewed. Under the impacts past practice and what the commission currently practices, the first three of those that we looked at would not have come before the committee today. And that's because the decision-making body for impacts, which is this committee, and the commission for our other grant programs have given staff the authority to process adjustment requests that fall below a certain threshold. And so we would like to propose to apply that same practice for BHD grant program in order to streamline the adjustment process. And another big reason that the committee may wish to do this is that so far we've been meeting quarterly, and the committee may not want to make those counties wait for the smaller requests until the next quarterly meeting. And so what you see on the screen here is what is reflected in the grant administration guide and what the impacts, or what the committee has given the commission staff authority to do for impacts. We would like to seek input from the committee today on whether you would like to adopt this streamlined way to process adjustments for behavioral health deflection. So what it would look like practically is that the committee would only need to review adjustments that requested to move more than 10% of a grantee's total award, and or a request that changes a grantee's program substantially, or what you see described as the formal approval process. And so we would need a vote on this. So please ask questions if you have them. Yes, Dr. Brigham.
I was just going to make a motion that we approve the recommended streamlining.
Thank you, Dr. Brigham. Ken, I think I see your hand next.
My hand was up next. I'll just ask real quick if there's a second, and then I'll make my substantive comment.
Since my hand is up, I can certainly second that. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeremiah. So real quickly, I just wanted to emphasize from a staff standpoint on the third bullet, the fact that it says may. At CJC, if we receive something that's even under 10% and even appears to be non-substantive, if we have any doubt, we bring it to the committee. And so I want to make sure that the committee knows that in empowering staff in this way, it still means you may see some small requests, but they would only be ones that we thought were questionable.
Thank you, Ken. Jeremiah?
Thank you, Will. You mentioned that it's consistent with the administrative authority for some of the other grant distributions of CJC. I also just wanted to point out for the committee, it's consistent with how other state agencies like the Department of Corrections also approaches adjustment requests. We also follow a 10% adjustment administratively that same way. So it is consistent with how other state agencies approach this matter. Thank you.
Thank you. Was there any additional discussion? So Ken, roll call vote or voice vote?
Voice vote.
Absolutely. Okay, so all those in favor of streamlining the adjustment request approval process for the BHD grant program by granting staff the authority to process the requests that do not add, remove, or make the substantive changes to a grant-funded program, and do not request to reallocate more than 10% of that grant program's total grant funding, please say aye.
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 Those opposed, please say nay. That would be approved. Thank you very much. Hey, y'all. So next up in our agenda is actually to take a break. I believe we are a few minutes early, but is there any opposition to taking our break a few minutes early? Okay. Well, it is 10:39 now, so we can begin again at 10:50. Thank you. Oh crap, it's 9. Hey, everyone, if you're within earshot, it is about 10:50. We could start coming back. We'll give everyone another minute or so to come back. Okay, so it's about 10:51. I'm seeing some movement on the virtual screen, so we'll go ahead and come back from our break. Thank you so much for your work on those action items again. And so next, we will go through and update the committee on the programs that we are seeing unfold, including any changes that have been flagged and during the most recent quarterly reporting. But before we dive in, I do want to mention first that all contracts or contract amendments have been fully executed. All contracts signed before October 3rd received their disbursement on time, which was October 5th. And this was every grantee but 3. And the next disbursement will be in March. And again, we will convene in February as the discussed intervention point if necessary. And so we will have time at the end to answer additional questions about the future meetings. But for now, dive into the local program updates. Okay. And so as a reminder, the committee asked to be updated on tribal engagement that counties have had each quarter. And so that is what you see presented here on the left side of this slide. 6 county programs reported engagement with at least one tribal government. 4 county programs had indicated plans to either consult or engage with at least one tribal government as part of the grant planning process. And then 17 county programs did not report tribal government engagement, but of those 17, 4 did indicate to us that they had no overlaps in jurisdiction with tribal governments. We also thought that it would be important to highlight the high number of programs that are engaging in implementation technical assistance with our partners at OHSU as they develop their programs, and you'll see this on the right side of this slide. And so all programs have engaged in at least one virtual TA opportunity, and this can include a number of things: echo attendance, one-on-one meetings with TA teams, help with templates or policies, TA attendance at county meetings or local program meetings, and still more. 13 counties are currently engaged in one-on-one TA. And then if you are curious about the specifics, this was included in the meeting materials that you received via email from Avery. And these numbers, particularly for engagement, will differ slightly than what you see in the quarterly reporting. For this, we relied on reporting from the implementation team for some of these items. So as CJC has done in the past, our goal with this program breakdown table is just to give a broad sense of the counties that, or the types of programs, excuse me, that counties are operating across the state. Tillamook County is still planning their programming, but of these remaining 26 counties, each of these is including an officer intervention or officer referral pathway. Many county programs have more than one arm, so to speak. And a further 11 counties are incorporating either mobile crisis or a community response team as part of their deflection program. And finally, a few programs are dedicating some of their funding toward behavioral health centers, including stabilization and sobering centers. And so again, another thing that we've reported to the committee previously is relating to program administration, and applicants have taken several approaches to assigning administrative homes to their respective programs. There were just a couple of reported changes to CJC in administrative homes, in both cases from a broader county administration category to either, in one case, a sheriff's office, and in the other, a behavioral health entity. And so this does leave the largest number of county programs housed with a behavioral health entity, about 30% or just under 1 in 3, followed by sheriff's office is the next most common administrative home with about 22%. And then the remaining categories, community corrections, the broad county administration or district attorney's office, were between 4 and 5 counties programs, or about 15 to 19%. Operational status is another thing that we asked about, and I don't want to bury the lead. So I will start with reporting that no counties who said that they would be operational by November are not operational. And so this means that there are currently 18 county programs operating in their respective jurisdictions, with 3 additional county programs anticipated to come online before the end of December. And then the remaining 6 counties anticipate achieving operational status early in the new year in January 2025. Okay. And then as programs come on board, we are seeing programs expanding their eligibility to include more than just possession of controlled substance charge. Union and Tillamook counties are still planning who their eligible populations will be. So these numbers are based on 25 counties or county programs. And in the initial applications, there were 17 programs that stated that their eligible population would be those with a standalone PCS charge only. But based on a more updated inclusion-exclusion criteria survey and the quarterly reporting information, that number is now 11 programs. And previously, 9 programs would accept other crime types, such as those listed here in the slide, the misdemeanor theft or misdemeanor property destruction, trespassing, or other quality of life crimes. And that number has now expanded to 14 programs that will accept some of these other crimes alongside PCS. And so that means about 44% or just under half of counties report eligibility as PCS or PCSU only, while just over half, about 56%, reported their eligibility to also include some of these other crimes, such as loitering, misdemeanor theft, trespassing, or others. And when we have presented this in the past, we did used to include a third category that highlighted whether the county had specific conditions related to enrollment in their program. The most common by far was being a resident of that county. Some others that were relatively common that we saw were the individual could not already be on community supervision, or the individual could not have specific criminal histories. For example, a violent criminal history. And of the 25 programs, 24 of those listed at least one additional criteria alongside what you see on the screen. And again, the most common was being a county resident. And so I want to pause here and see if there are any questions on these updates. Okay. I'm hearing no questions. And so the next piece of this, I will stop sharing the presentation and do this part live, but know that these links do exist in the presentation so that you're able to access them at any time. Bear with me just one moment while I reshare. Okay, and so using either of the links, so I'll do it again here. What you should be seeing is, Avery, can you confirm you see a web browser with the CJC's website on it?
I sure do.
Perfect, thank you so much. And so this is the commission website, and this is the homepage. And what I would like to show you here is this dashboards button. And if you click that button, it will take you to the Statistical Analysis Center, where you can then click this blue button that says CJC Data Dashboards. And when you click that link, it brings you to all of the commission's dashboards. The ones that I want to illustrate or explain today are the first two, the possession of controlled substance dashboard, as well as the behavioral health deflection programs dashboard. And I'll start with the possession of a controlled substance dashboard. So this dashboard, it brings you to the home page, and if you click on the About tab, it has some information that we keep updated about House Bill 4002. There's a link to the actual enrolled bill. There's a little bit more information about this dashboard. So when the law went into effect, part of that requires that CJC collect and analyze data about not only deflections, but arrests, charges, and convictions for unlawful possession of a controlled substance, as well as delivery of controlled substance offenses. And so right now, what we have is arrest data. And so I just want to preview that for you. Also note, however, that this information for arrest is from LEDS. And so it is fingerprinted arrests only. And there are some specific conditions. If you'll forgive me, I'll go back and make sure that I highlight those. This data that we're about to look at is filtered to only arrests where one or more of the charges was for PCS. And each arresting event is only counted one time, regardless of how many offenses are alleged. So this will show fingerprinted arrests. This would exclude instances of citation in lieu of arrest and instances where, for example, a police officer brings someone directly to treatment. And so if you click on the Arrest tab, cases are coming soon, but are not quite available just yet. If you click on the Arrest tab, what you see is on the left side, a plot of weekly fingerprinted arrests for possession of a controlled substance. There are also some vertical lines here that shows some policy changes in Oregon or some conditions that made this different. For example, I think we're all aware that during COVID-19, there was a precipitous drop in many criminal legal proceedings. And then that did increase again until ballot measure 110. And then, of course, as we would expect, the possession charges decreased significantly. And then after this far right dotted line here is the passage of House Bill 4002 when it took effect. And so there was, as you may expect, a spike. If you hover over the data points, they'll give you actual numbers if you're interested to see the numbers themselves. But also this shows a pattern that before COVID, possession of a controlled substance was relatively high, and then it dropped during COVID, dropped further during ballot measure 110. And then, of course, we saw an increase after House Bill 4002. This is weekly, so it's not daily. We don't have quite as many data points, but they are accessible if you would like to see. And I also want to point out these toggles down at the bottom. These are really important. The default view for this dashboard is to include all cases all events where there is a PCS charge. But as we know, in many cases, there are other charges in that event that are an additional crime. For example, drug delivery or trespass, theft, some of those things we've already discussed in program updates. So it is easy to toggle and see if we want only those arrests that were for sort of standalone PCS. We see those are significantly lower than if we were to include all cases. And again, for each week, these data points are accessible. The pattern is largely the same. It was highest and then it dropped again, and it's increased somewhat after House Bill 4002. However, you can also choose to look at just those cases where arrest included PCS as well as another charge. And then, so that is the plot on the left side of the dashboard. On the right, you'll notice a map and then additional information on the most common charges for those cases where there was an additional charge alongside the PCS. And so what we see is that the most common of these additional charges is criminal trespass. Again, one additional note of caution with this dashboard is that we can't always differentiate the type of possession from the data, from the LEDS data. So it could be that this would include user amount, the substantial quantity, as well as the commercial drug offense. So this is any PCS. Also common additional charges were failure to appear, theft, a firearm, an ex-con in possession of a firearm, and then violation of probation condition, bench warrant. These were the most common across the state. And then the very last part of this dashboard is it provides at the top on the map since September 1st, the total number, as well as counts by county. And if we hover over a county, which I will do here for Clackamas, you were first, the first one I landed on. So for each county that you hover over, you can also see the agencies and the count by agency within that county. So if we look at any particular county, at Clackamas, for example, we see that Clackamas County Sheriff's Office has the most arrests, followed by Milwaukee PD and Oregon City. And if we look just one county down at Marion County, Salem Police Department has the highest, followed by Marion County Sheriff's Office. And so this is updated regularly, and the last updated date is generally available on the first page. So cases are not yet available from OJD and Odyssey, but we do have the arrest data on this dashboard. So before we look at another dashboard, I want to pause here and see if there are any questions or ways that I can make this more clear. Yes, Ken.
I just wanted to note for the committee that for case level information, we just have a request pending to the Judicial Department for their approval to use their data on a regular basis to update. And so we're hoping to have that soon. My goal is to have that before legislative days in December. And so hopefully that'll be up soon, and we'll be sure to let the committee know when we see that. What we do know is I believe as of earlier this week, there are around 1,035 cases that have been initiated in circuit courts across the state, but that's what we hope to display soon.
Thank you, Ken. Were there any other questions or comments about the dashboard before we move on to the other dashboard? Yes, Paul.
Couple of questions. One is, how do these, and I know this is early, these early arrest numbers support the assumptions you made about the community corrections population increases that you were projecting for once 4002 was implemented? And maybe Jeremiah can chime in.
I'm happy to see that Jeremiah turned on his camera. Hopefully that means he's willing to speak to that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, Paul, that is a great question. And so for those of you not familiar, the forecasted work for next biennium shows an increase of approximately 4,000 individuals on community supervision. So for these misdemeanor probation cases. Paul, it's a little early to tell. Ken's showing us the arrest data here. We are also tracking the actual cases filed through OJD. They have a very similar sort of website setup, although it's not public facing, but it shows, so for instance, this shows that there were 143 firearm possessions along with these cases. And I think as of last week, there were 90 firearm possessions actually filed by district attorneys in conjunction with these cases. So we're tracking to see what's going to be actual PCS cases, as well as potential other charges that may carry longer durations of supervision, or also include could have a prison impact. By next April, I think we could potentially see some adjustments in the April forecast for corrections when it comes out at that time. But I think we just need a little more time to know how much of an impact this will have.
Right. Thank you. Thank you. And I kind of figured it was early days, but I also remember seeing a slide that you presented at one of the past meetings, Ken, that showed the other types of crimes associated with PCS arrests being much higher than in the past. So I suspect that would impact the probation population as well.
Right. Yeah. So at December Ledge Days, I had a two-line chart, one that showed just the PCS arrests, one that showed overall arrests, which include PCS, but then also other types. And those had increased. What we have seen as we've delved into that data more deeply is that the largest single driver, though it may not be the largest category just overall compared to every other type of charge, was FTA warrants and other types of warrants, right? And so that is happening. We're trying to think of how to conceptualize those, because even if it's an FTA2 kind of new crime, quote unquote, it's tied to a different crime. And so we're trying to think about how to count those as whether they are really new or whether they're something different. I will note that what we have, as you can see on the red line on the chart right now, we saw an initial spike that remained pretty robust for about the first month or so, but the number of arrests for PCS have been falling. We're seeing a pretty similar reduction in the overall number of arrests, and it's not just the number of PCS arrests falling. It's overall. We saw a big spike in the beginning of September, and we may be reaching more of a steady state, kind of leveling off now. But I think that's only happened over the past couple of weeks, and so we're waiting to see if that's really a trend or if that's more of a blip. As you can see, they do kind of yo-yo back and forth a bit.
Great, thank you.
Were there additional questions or comments about the possession of controlled substance dashboard? Okay. Well, we can check back relatively soon. Hopefully by legislative days, information about cases will be in there as well. But you can also, if you wanted, click on the BHD dashboard. This will take you directly to the programs dashboard, which is the other one that we're looking at today. Potentially. That's all right. If not, we'll go the long way. So last time we clicked on possession of a controlled substance. This time we're going to click on behavioral health deflection programs. It looks the same when you click on it at first. Tells you the last updated date here on the home screen. However, when you click about, just like the last time, you'll find some important background information, including a list of acronyms to make this more accessible. The official CJC FAQs that we host on our website and keep updated, as well as a link back to the CJC website. However, there are a couple of really interesting things in here that I'm glad to show you. The next one is another map. This is similar to the map that we just looked at. You'll notice that there are two colors, a grayish and a blue, and the blue indicates the presence of a BHD program. So I will pick on a different county this time. Let's see who's going. Lane County, you're the first one I clicked on. So when we click on a county, this works the same regardless of which county. This box on the right side of the screen populates, and it gives some very basic information about the program, the coordinating agency, an individual's name if we have it, an address. We didn't put phone numbers, just an address of where they can be found, the formula funding dollar amount, and then from the applications, the required partners we listed in their associated categories. So those categories were the Behavioral Health Resource Network, Community Mental Health Program, District Attorney's Office, and Law Enforcement. And I think I chose a good example because, as you can see, Lane County is working with a number of behavioral health resource networks, and it seems to spill off the page. But if you were to hover over it, you can see the full list of the entries into this particular part. Similarly, if we come down to the law enforcement one, we can see that there are a number of police and sheriff's offices involved with Lane County's program, and they are listed here. And this is drawn from the application. And again, this works on any county that we click on. We just have that basic information, funding amount, an address, and then required program partners. This next tab is the funding overview tab, and this simply presents a pie chart of the total distribution of funding, dollar amounts. Earlier we talked about the tribal government allotment, and on the right side it just provides all of the counties and their dollar amounts as well. And just as a note, you'll notice that the counties that did not apply, we provided a zero value for their funding amount after the reallocation of their funding through the formula. And then this last tab is the one that I'm most excited to show you, and that is the budget details tab. So we, along with another senior researcher, Carrie, have been working very hard on this. And again, this information is pulled directly from county application budget projection sheets. And then we designed these categories to organize these line items for each application based on sort of common requirements and expenditures for each of the county programs. Now, this is from applications. This is from September. This is not current as of what happened today in this meeting, but we will, of course, update it accordingly. And so I want to next provide you with a brief overview of these three categories that I mentioned. And this is really about what the funding is doing. And so if the dollars are going to county and community partner expenses that are about building and maintaining that integrated deflection program, including like the program coordinators, required supplies and equipment, as well as training and travel. And statewide, we can see that this build category was about 6.6 million, or roughly 36% of the total funds from the counties. The next category that is in gray here, my apologies, and I'll zoom in slightly in case that's easier to see, is the deliver category. And that is about supporting the county and wider system efforts to initiate those deflection services. And this can be supplies and support for the district attorneys, law enforcement agencies, or other county partners involved in the program. And we see this is the smallest of the categories at about 14% of the allocated total from the budget sheets that we've gotten. And then the largest category here, right at 50% of that total, is the serve category. And this is where these are things that are directly for the client. This is treatment, this is peer mentors, this is healthcare providers or housing and shelter assistance, barrier removal. All those things are classified in the serve category. And now that we've sort of oriented to it, I want to show you my favorite part, which is where if we click on one of these bars, which I will choose treatment because it's the largest, what we see populate on the right side, similar to the last dashboard, is for each county that had a line item in this category, it is listed. And when you hover over it, it tells you the narrative that we received associated with that line item. And so if we were to scroll through this list, we could see, for example, that statewide, there's obviously a lot of funding dollars going to treatment, and that's going as either subrecipients, it's going to case managers, care coordinators, peer navigators, outreach, any number of treatment options. And those are, again, classified by county and county program. And if you want more information, for example, the narrative associated with any particular budget line item, you can hover over it and it will populate in that little box. So we'll just look at one more of these supplies and support in the build category. And so again, as we see, this is where we look at things like administration fees, central cost allocation, space rentals, the indirect costs. We see here some grant administration funding or computers for a coordinator, which is a required part of the program. So again, for each of these, the narrative is accessible. And there, I will unclick on this to make that disappear. And then there is one more view of this dashboard that I want to make sure that you see, and that is this whole time we've actually been looking at the statewide view. But if you use this drop down, we can look at any particular county. I'm sorry, Marion County, I'm going to pick you this time. And it will change the dashboard view to show you specifically funding totals, percentages, and associated line items for that particular county program. And again, this was what we got in the application in September, so nothing from today has been updated, but we will get this updated. So I want to pause here to see if there are questions about the behavioral health programs dashboard.
I just have a comment. I would just say this is great information. I'm going to play around with it because I'm really fascinated by it, especially because Jackson County shows up with the darkest color in the number of arrests. And so that has piqued my interest about why that is.
Thank you for your comment. If you find that it is not accessible, please let us know, and we're glad to make changes to make it more accessible. Any other questions or comments about either dashboard, including the Behavioral Health Programs dashboard or the PCS dashboard? No. I'm muted. Okay. So if there are no additional questions, what I'd like to do now is invite Erica Simeon of the Oregon Health and Science University, Portland State University School of Public Health to walk us through the rollout of the statewide data system for behavioral health deflection, including some preliminary findings and the best practice and relating to the best practices report that will be due to the legislature next year. So I can see your screen, Erica. I can see your presentation. So take it away.
Awesome. Thanks, Will. Liz is actually going to present the first half of the presentation for us. So I'm going to let her get started.
Can you hear me? I forgot to unmute myself.
We can hear you.
Awesome. Thanks, Erica. So we're really excited to present some of the early days data from grantees who have recorded deflection events into our REDCap database. And then Erica is going to describe in a lot of detail our new and improved database, and we've saved lots of time for questions and discussion. So I will jump right in. I think most of you know that in House Bill 4002, our OHSU PSU School of Public Health team is contracted to collaborate closely with CJC to build and maintain our secure web-based database, which allows individual programs to track referrals and participation in their deflection programs in real time. Erica and her team are working hard to provide just about daily technical assistance to sites who are using the REDCap database and have also provided multiple training events and will continue to do so as we move through. The second half of our contract which goes through now until June, involves working with CJC to produce a best practices report on deflection, really focusing mostly on Oregon, as well as the way Oregon fits into the national emerging deflection environment. And so that report is to be submitted by CJC to the legislature on April 1st. So, as of November 4th, 2024, of the counties that were operational at that time, 11 counties recorded at least one human referred to deflection. 282 individual unduplicated humans were referred to deflection as of November 4th, 2024. So a couple of just details about where those numbers come from. As I said, the web-based data system allows us to capture deflections as soon as they are entered in real time. Our data team will extract those data monthly, clean them, and then create analyses which will be distributed by CJC to individual sites so they can look at their individual data. And of course, we'll be reporting to CJC monthly. So of those 282 persons who were referred to deflection, 7 of them had multiple deflection events recorded prior to November 4th. So one of them was had 3 deflection events recorded, and 6 of them had 2 deflection events recorded. I will add, because this has come up as a question ongoing, none of the folks so far entered into the REDCap database have showed up in 2 counties. So where are our deflection participants now, sort of on the road from initial referral to a deflection program to completion? And again, this is early days, and not all of the deflection information, of course, has been entered by individual sites. There's an expectation that we can expect a lag of 2 weeks to a month before participant information is entered. So these are really conservative estimates of the level of engagement of folks in deflection programs. So as I said before, 282 folks were referred to a deflection program. Of those, we have more detailed deflection data entered into the database for 240 of those. So of those 240 persons, and again, these are unduplicated, there are 188 eligible participants. And as we know, eligibility varies a bit by county, but we do have kind of a yes or no, was the person eligible to participate? So then we have 188 eligible participants, and 166 participants were actually enrolled in deflection programs. And I'll add that 140 of those had deflection plans documented in our database. So again, early days. 2 participants were recorded as completing a deflection program. Again, definitions of complete vary by county, and we'll be talking more about that, particularly when we report the qualitative data. 20 of those who were enrolled in deflection programs did not complete for various reasons, and 144, as far as we can tell, are still engaged in the program. So we have data on the first point of contact between a deflection candidate and primarily law enforcement. So what this chart shows is that of those 248 deflection events, 194 involved law enforcement as the first point of contact, and then 50 on the first point of contact was a district attorney's office. So far, we only have 1 peer support worker or navigator recorded as the first point of contact, and we'll see how those numbers go up as data entry proceeds. And we have 3 events where a deflection coordinator was the first point of contact. So what happens when someone is referred to deflection but is ineligible, and why are folks determined as ineligible by local programs? So we have that information for 43 deflection events who were deemed ineligible for program participation. And I apologize for the small font. We'll be distributing the slides. The main reason for ineligibility recorded so far is not attending their court appearance, followed by not being a county resident, community justice supervision, a prior disqualifying condition, previous deflection involvement, charged with another crime that would disqualify them, or a pending warrant. So we wanted to look in as much detail as possible at referrals to services. So this slide is a little bit busy, so I'm going to walk through it, and when we come back for questions and discussions, we can come back. A takeaway from this slide is for those who are referred to services, and so far These are 54 referrals that are documented, and we expect this this number to go up quite a bit, again, as sites bring in more folks and catch up with their data entry. So 21 folks of these 54 do not have referrals recorded yet. 12 had referrals to substance use disorder treatment. 7 got referrals to mental health, social services, and SUD treatment. 3 were referred to mental health treatment and SUD treatment, and 2 were referred to some other treatment and SUD treatment. So the takeaway message here is that for sites who are starting to refer folks, they're getting referred to multiple wraparound services. And, I think most of us agree that that is the goal, one of the goals for Deflection. So this is some preliminary data about screenings and assessments, which are typically provided to Deflection participants, and is a main goal of Deflection, again, using referrals to screen and assess folks for service needs. We asked sites to indicate when possible which assessments were administered. And again, I think some of the sites are still working out their specific workflows to communicate this information back to coordinators. From what we can see, sites are implementing kind of other assessments than the standard ones that were identified for inclusion in our database. We were interested that the CRAFT, which is a tool to assess substance use and root causes of substance use for adolescents and young adults, is being used. The cannabis use disorder identification test is being used. And then also, more familiar tools like the DSM-5 and the GAD. Where's the GAD? Okay, sorry, we don't see the GAD, but we see the DSM-5 and the PSQ-9 depression screenings. So one of the things that we're able to capture in REDCap, which we think is incredibly important, is what are the circumstances of Deflection candidates, Deflection participants at the time when they join programs. As you can see from this chart, the vast majority were living in tents. Only 31 of 156 reported living in a house or apartment or some kind of dorm. This is a pretty subjective question. Again, coordinators entered this information. We have 156 folks where we have a lot of the social determinants information available. So 92 out of our 156 events were not in a stable housing situation. And 75 out of our 156 folks were not in a safe housing situation. We're able to track this information and changes as we move forward with housing status at the start versus housing status at completion. And then that'll help us assess whether the Deflection programs may in fact be a path to safe housing. So with that, I am going to pass the torch to Erica Simeon, who has really put her heart and soul into building this database and working closely with all of the grantees, not just to refine the database, but to make sure that they have what they need to do their data entry. So Erica, I'm gonna stop No, I'm going to keep sharing because I'm going to do your slides. And so why don't you just tell me next when you're ready so that I don't interrupt you?
Okay, sounds good. Thanks, Liz. Hi, everyone. So we wanted to, there are a lot of slides coming up, but we're going to go through them briefly, but just to really give you an idea of how we're actually capturing this deflection data. And as Liz said, we're using the RedCap software, which is a secure web-based platform. It is HIPAA compliant. It does allow for multiple users at sites, which has been helpful, especially for counties where not all of the information is flowing through their coordinator, or they have difficulties with information sharing. It allows somebody in their behavioral health partner to enter any behavioral health information. It will also allow someone in the DA's office to enter their relevant information. So that has been actually something that's been very helpful for counties as they're standing up programs. And then to note, the data that we are capturing in RedCap will have identifiers, and that's going to allow the CJC to link that to their administrative data. Next slide. And so now just briefly to walk you through kind of what the database looks like. This is the project dashboard, and when somebody opens up their county, they will see all of their clients. They have the ability to put an alternate ID so they can help identify their clients more easily. And then if you look across, it has all of the different forms that to be completed for each participant. And it does allow for multiple deflection events for each participant. And also just note that not all of these forms are going to be filled out for every single participant, because it depends. Someone might drop out, or they're not eligible, or something else happens. And at that point, the requirement to fill out the remaining forms drops off. Next slide. So this is pretty standard. We have our identifying information for each participant. Again, that's how the CJC will link with their data. And then we have some standard demographics that is, I'm sure you've all seen before: race, ethnicity, gender, disability, those things. And next slide. And then the next is the deflection referral form. So as we were building this, all of these programs have kind of different models. And so we had to come up with a way to really capture everything that was going on throughout the entire deflection process. So really the first step, as Liz showed you one of the slides, is that we have that first point of contact, right? Like, who was the person who said, I'm going to refer this individual to deflection? And so there's a whole host of choices for people, law enforcement, other first responders, peer support, coordinator, and so on. We're also collecting the location of that contact, what the referral pathway was. So these are some established kind of nationally recognized pathways for deflection, going from law enforcement with criminal charges all the way down to community referrals or social referrals. And then the next step of that process is the type of handoff. So from that first point of contact, how are they getting moved through the next piece of the or part of the process? Sorry if I sorry if I stumble a little. I'm very tired today. I had a little minor emergency last night and I didn't get a lot of sleep, so bear with me. So this is where they're getting handed off to the next point in the deflection process. So some counties are requiring just instructions to report to court within a certain amount of time. Some are providing warm handoffs, and some are requiring, or some are allowing different or have different methods of handoff. Sorry. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Thank you. And so from then, For some counties, there is this point where once they've been referred to deflection, they get assessed for further eligibility. So some people might drop off at this point. There are different people who can determine eligibility. We're also capturing if there were any charges associated with the event, if they were held in abeyance, and then if they did qualify for the program. And if they did not qualify, then we're capturing why they did not qualify. Next slide. So if they did qualify, then the next question is, did they agree to enter deflection? And if they say yes, then the form for the social determinants of health measures will pop up for people to fill out. So this is the, we already showed the housing slide. So we're looking at housing situation, employment, medical needs, food insecurity, and insurance status. And so these are all collected at the time of program entry. So we have kind of a baseline for each individual. Liz, next slide, please. And next we have what is their deflection plan. So this is a list of the requirements that an individual must complete or must do in order to complete their deflection. So the counties have different requirements. And so this list is based on that information that we got from counties. Next slide. And here we did see a little bit about these assessments. So basically we are asking what types of assessments. We have different mental health, different SUD, physical health, social determinants of health screenings, a lot. And we also have the opportunity for people to check any other screenings that they did. And we're just collecting the date if possible, but really just knowing what screenings and assessments individuals are getting is really important. And from that, we're asking if there was a substance use disorder identified and if there was a mental health disorder identified and how they were able to obtain that information, and then kind of specifics about the substance type and the diagnosis. Next slide. And so this is actually, I'm very proud of this little this little matrix here. When we started out, the referrals to services was pretty complicated, but through lots of input from grantees and beta testing and all kinds of things, we were able to come up with a pretty simple form. So really what we're getting here is, were they referred to a service? For SUD treatment, what did they get? Did they get medically managed inpatient? Did they get outpatient? What type of treatment were they referred to? And then we want to know if they received the service or not. And we're not asking for any dates or any, we tried to keep it pretty simple. Were they referred and did they get it? And sometimes they might not know if it was received. So we do have that option as well. If somebody got referred to a service, but they did not receive the service, then we have this additional section that pops up indicated by the red arrow, which where we ask why they did not receive the service, because maybe there was a wait list, they declined the service, or there was a change to their treatment plan. Next slide. So deflection completion. So if according to their deflection plan, the coordinator and the team decides that somebody has completed the criteria for completion, then we ask what those criteria were. They are able to check multiple boxes here. And then if they do complete, then the social determinants of health measures will come back up so that we can capture what their status is from along all of those measures at the end of their deflection completion. So that will allow us to assess if there were any changes to their status during that time. If they, sorry, the slide's a little busy. On the right-hand side, if they did not complete the deflection program, Then we ask why they did not complete it. And then also if there is any additional information about their criminal justice status after not completing the program. Next slide. So I think might want to pause here just to see if because that was a lot, to see if anyone has any particular questions at this point. Okay.
And
oh,
we
go
do
ahead.
have a chat open, yeah, and then folks can raise their hands, and then maybe Avery and Will, we can all kind of work together to make sure that we call on everyone who has a question.
Yeah.
Or unmute yourself and just shout out.
That works too. So as I said, this is, the deflection process can be complicated, but we really wanted to try and capture the story of what is happening statewide, but also at individual sites, because it is more than just numbers, and we want to look at the different pathways that people are entering the program, at which point people are leaving the program. If they're not completing, where are they leaving and why? We also want to look at, as I said, changes in social determinants of health and quality of life, looking for changes there, and also demographic disparities. So that was really the main focus of how we set up this database to be able to capture all of those things. Next slide. So in addition to that, our team is also or has conducted qualitative interviews with 16 out of the 28 counties that have received deflection grants. They were conducted between August and October of this year, and we were really looking at getting more information on their implementation process, building partnerships, and any barriers and facilitators that they were encountering during their planning and implementation phases. And a full analysis of these interviews is going to be included to help inform the best practices report that we'll be submitting in April. Next slide. And so we do have just a few very, very preliminary qualitative findings, but most grantees did report being on track with to implement their programs. And I think, as Will said, everybody was able to get their programs up as scheduled so far. And they did report having a lot of partner engagement. A lot of teams did embrace the start small approach as they were trying to stand up. A few programs I think had limited or soft launches with the plans to scale up over time, and most sites did say that they are planning to implement additional approaches to their model, like different pathways. And a lot of the start small approach was grounded in the concern for capacity to implement these programs. I think there was a tight, timeline, and just building all those partnerships and information sharing was a concern for a lot of sites. And in addition to that, there was a lot of variation in the established partnerships that different counties had. And so that did affect how quickly some counties were able to get their programs started. Next slide. So for the best practices report, our team is doing an intensive review of national literature, as well as research that has been done on outcomes, data collection, and evaluation designs for deflection and diversion programs. We are going to include findings, as I said, from a full analysis of the qualitative interviews. We will also have a more in-depth analysis of emerging data from REDCap, and then present recommendations for deflection best practices. And our intent for this is really to have it be more, less of an academic manuscript report type thing, but more of a handbook for what is happening in Oregon, what is working in Oregon in the context of, as Liz said, the national landscape, and including resources, and what can we do to help deflection programs in the state of Oregon. Next slide. And so next steps for our team, we're going to be continuing to do technical assistance for all of the sites. We have a couple more. I think there are 6 more sites that are still coming online. We will be doing trainings for them for data collection and helping them fine tune their process for how they're going to collect data. We're going to support the CJC with monthly reporting, and this includes statewide as well as individual reports to the CJC that will then get distributed to all of the individual programs, and hopefully the monthly reporting is going to enable them to look at what's going on with their program, make adjustments as needed. So it's really to give them support as they move forward with their programs. And then collaborating with the CJC on analysis of the Red Cap data. And I think that might be everything. Next slide. I think we just have questions next. Yeah, so if anyone wants to ask questions, we are here.
I don't have a question, but I just want to thank you all for the presentation and for all the information we have put out today. This is the first I've seen pretty much any of this, and so it's pretty amazing to see the pathways folks are taking, and even though the data is all preliminary, it's very fascinating. But I'll just stop with my platitudes and let Judge Shanti probably make a real comment.
Well, I think those platitudes are well deserved. The question I have is the majority of assessments were other. What could be the instruments that account for other at that high percentage?
Yeah.
I'll take that one,
ahead.
and then Erica will follow up. So we looked in the database, and there's an option for counties to write in some more detail about those assessments. That wasn't really complete enough for us to present, and Erica has a plan.
I'm developing a plan. But yes, now that everything is kind of up and running, people are starting to enter data. The next step for our team is to really do some data quality by looking at, like, there's a lot of missing and data that doesn't make sense. And so that's really our next step right now, is just kind of getting everyone up to speed and finding out where they're, like, why are there so many others? Is it because they're not checking the right box, or because we don't have the right responses available? So that's the next step for us.
Looks like Paul Solomon, yeah.
Thank you for all the good work you're doing around the data collection. I know it's been an onerous undertaking, to say the least. I've got a couple of questions. One is around the completeness, integrity of the data that you're seeing. Are people completing all of the fields that they should be? If not, is there kind of a follow-up, or what's the approach to capture all of the data? And then and if you covered this, forgive me, I may have missed it, but I'm curious about how you are, in your reporting, are going to be able to address the varying definitions of success, for example. I mean, I know there are some things that are very unique to each county, which make it a little more challenging to just aggregate data based on a specific area, or so any feedback you have there would be helpful.
So Paul, I will take kind of the first easy part of your question and then punt to Erica for the hard part of your question. So just kind of to go back a little bit. So we have 282 humans as of November 4th, 331 as of 9:30 this morning. So, you know, the numbers just keep going up and up. So of those 282, we had more detailed referral data on all but 40 of those. Obviously, to all of you who are working, you know, in the field, it's hard to get the data entered on time. So what we asked folks to do is, can you at least get the identifying information in there, right? Like a name, a birthday, a SID, and then we'll have the counts. And again, those the more detailed information might come a little bit later with up to a month or so lag. And Erica has plans.
I do. I do. Yeah, as I responded to Judge Shanti, I think a lot of it is just going to be our team just going through the database and continuing to give technical assistance to all of the sites and, you know, finding, you know, if they're having difficulty getting one particular type or one particular data point, let's figure out how to help you do that. And just yeah, really doing some data quality, some heavy data quality checks. And we are at the point where yeah, it's time to start doing that. So more to come on that. but I was just gonna say, but the we are expecting that in the next couple of months, there's just going to be a lot more filled in as people are still struggling a little bit with just getting enough staff even sometimes to enter data and who is doing what. So but for the most part, I've been getting really positive feedback from everyone saying, like, you know, I've been getting lots of requests for data entry access, so people are really starting to get that going. So we think that it's going to improve greatly in the next month or so. And then Liz left me the hard part. So yeah, this is an ongoing thing, like looking at success. And I think I think we're going to be looking at a couple of different things, right? Because all these programs are different. So I think we will be able to kind of lump together some successful successful criteria for qualification for, I'm sorry, completion. I'm so tired. And then, so I think that is important, but I also think the, you know, assessing changes in quality of life is going to be an important determinant, as well as if people are not completing, why. So I think it's going to be, I think the picture is going to have to be painted using several variables and not just were they successful or were they not successful. I don't know if that fully answered your question, but I think it's going to be more than just that. Did they complete, yes or no?
Yeah, and this has been a big topic of conversation also in the qualitative interviews. Some of the programs are, you know, as they figure out kind of their focus for participation and who's providing what services and how do referrals work, et cetera. You know, what does it mean to be a successful deflectee? So again, in REDCap, we can talk about, and we're using completion, not completion, because we really don't want to make presumptions from this quantitative data about definitions for success. But again, we are asking sites to describe their definitions of success and their emerging definitions of success. But again, through REDCap, we are able to track sort of big buckets of reasons for not completing, if that's helpful. And gosh, Will, can I put you on the spot just to give like a little preview of what we're hoping to do with some of the linked administrative data?
Can I add one more thing to that before
yeah.
that happens, Liz?
Yeah.
So Paul, one of the big limitations is that everyone is going to have a different length of time that they're in the program, right? Some counties are requiring 60 days. Some have an infinite amount of time that someone can be in the program. They're in the program as long as they need to be. And so that is a huge limitation. So how do you, I mean, you can't really quantify that. So so I think that's why we're taking the approach where we're looking at these other things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
Yeah. Sorry, Will, go ahead.
Yeah, no worries. So Liz, I just want to make sure that I'm talking about the right thing. Linking the administrative data to the other administrative data sources. Is that what we're talking about?
Exactly, yeah.
Yes, yes, of course. So yes, as part of House Bill 4002, CJC is required to track changes not just in deflection, but also the arrest, the dashboard that we looked at earlier, in cases, and then the correction side further in. And so what we will be able to do is, in capturing the name, date of birth, and SID number, we at CJC can link those individuals to sort of track their trajectory through the criminal justice system, or sort of see where the points are, where people are either successful or not. So some of that may be in the administrative data, but it won't be as detailed or granular as what we see here in the sort of programmatic statewide data system database. The administrative data is more statewide look at the changes in the broader system. Y'all, are there additional questions for Erica and Liz? Okay. I'm not seeing or hearing any, but they are still available. I believe that they would be happy if you wanted to email them with a specific question, or you can, of course, reach out to me and I can also facilitate that. Thank you both, Liz and Erica, so much for the updates on best practices and the emerging data from REDCap. Now I'm going to reshare my screen for just a moment. So you should be seeing a slide that says upcoming. Can someone give me a thumbs up if that's true? Perfect. Thank you, Avery. Okay. And so there are still a couple of important things happening this year, and I want to be sure and let the committee know about those as they relate to both impacts high utilizer as well as behavioral health deflection. And so there are two large things, or two bigger things that are happening. One of which is that CJC staff are working on the 2025 high utilizers report, which we expect to submit to the legislature on or about December 30th. And as a reminder, as a result of the changes in House Bill 4002, this will be the last separate impacts high utilizer report that CJC publishes. Starting in 2025, CJC will submit a combined report with both impacts high utilizer and behavioral health deflection, and this will be submitted to the legislature in September of 2025. For this year's impacts high utilizer report, committee members can expect to receive the report in draft form in the second week of December. And if you are not a committee member, the report, once published, will be located on the CJC publications page. And again, we expect to submit that on or about December 30th. And the second, on the right side of your screen here, the Center for Health Systems Effectiveness at Oregon Health and Science University is releasing the statewide impacts grant cycle 1 evaluation in December. And so this analysis used administrative data to compare outcomes in those places where impacts programs operated versus those places where impacts programs did not operate. But this, importantly, this evaluation is using data from the first grant cycle, which is 2020 through 2022. And so CHSC is funded to complete a second grant cycle evaluation, which would be for the subsequent 2 years. And that is expected in 2026. And so we will send the report once we receive it and it's published to the committee, and we will also post it to the CJC publications page. Okay. So just another note of something that I wanted to make sure the committee was aware of, that the Oregon Health and Science University implementation technical assistance does continue. And as you know, in the summer, they kicked off the technical assistance with a series of regional workshops where the Center for Health and Justice attended and assisted. And they've been offering varying levels of technical assistance so that grantees can engage in the level that they want. And this ranges, as I mentioned earlier, from regular one-on-one meetings to frequent webinars, hosting echoes. And these echoes are designed for programs to develop the deflection skill set and function as also a networking space for the multidisciplinary workforce here in Oregon. They also are also holding, several police trainings for officers to learn more about substance use disorders and the skills to have more productive encounters and help motivate change. And so when you do receive the slide, you'll notice that the echo is a link, and you can click that link and watch those as well. And we encourage you to do so. We found them very helpful. Okay. Another reminder, semi-annual reporting opens, and that will be on January 1st and will be due on January 25th. And this is where we will ask grantees to respond to very specific feedback from the committee from the August meetings, if your feedback required a direct response. We will provide those specific questions to the grantees in December so that they have time with those. And we have communicated and encouraged all grantees to watch the GRC meeting recordings from back in August and have sent broader feedback that the committee provided as part of ongoing discussions and communications with CJC and the TA providers. So what you all decided to do today was to set the tribal funding table. And so we will proceed with opening that request for grant proposal with RFGP, likely in December. And then when the group reconvenes in February, we can review all of this again. Okay, now this says we were doing good on time, but there has been a lot going on since the committee last met. We've done our best to summarize that for you in this meeting, but of course there may be questions or points of interest that you'd like the co-chairs to speak to. And so that could range from the legislative work or CJC's budget process. So before we do close the meeting, staff wanted to pass it to the GRC members to either ask us staff or the co-chairs questions about anything that piques your interest. Want to give a bit more time just in case those questions are percolating. Yes, Ken.
Well, nobody asked. Hopefully that means that it doesn't mean that nobody's interested, but I will just mention that as far as requests for future funding for deflection, for impacts high utilizers and other CJC programs, we included requests for additional funding for next biennium in our agency request budget. And the governor's budget comes out on December 2nd, that Monday. And so we'll have some better clarity at that point as to how we as an agency at CJC can advocate for the program going forward. We're also working with with the folks of the legislature on some technical tweaks to HB 4002. And also advising on some of the more policy-based questions that have been raised. And so just wanting to make folks aware that we're working behind the scenes, but still much of that does remain behind the scenes. And since we're waiting for that governor's budget to come out, I don't really know anything more than just what requests we did make through that budget process. We have to see what is approved and what is not.
Just giving a little more time for questions. Okay, well, I'm not seeing any additional hands or people coming off of mute. And so if there are no other questions at this time, then we can go ahead and close. I want to thank everyone for their participation and work today, as well as thank Avery and Monica who've been helping me behind the scenes. Please feel free to contact either me or Avery if you have any questions about anything that comes up as we close or after we close. And you can do so at these email addresses.
And I'd just like to real quickly thanks staff at CJC for putting together a good meeting today. And thank you, Will, for filling in for Avery. You've done a great job for your first meeting. And just so folks know, Avery had a beautiful baby boy on the day before Halloween. Calvin, I forget his middle name. Avery, you probably know. But I just wanted to pass that on, and hopefully she'll be rejoining us after the new year.
Yep, and that was Casey.
Thank you, everyone. You guys
Great.
are all grand.
Good to see you
Thank you,
all.
everybody.
Happy holidays.